All right, buckle up for this deep dive, folks, because this one is, well, let's just say it's going to stick with you. We're going deep into the case of Armin Meiwes. You might know him as the Cannibal of Rotenburg.
Yeah, this one is, it's definitely not your average true crime story. I mean, it really gets you thinking about, like, consent and morality, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, what are the limits of human behavior?
And the thing is, this case is so bizarre. Like, just reading through these sources, it's like one shocking detail after another. We're talking a 44-room mansion,
Oh, yeah.
a childhood obsession with, get this, Hansel and Gretel,
Oh.
an online forum, like a whole community dedicated to cannibalism. And the victim actually wanted to be eaten. It's like something out of a nightmare.
It really is, and it's easy to get caught up in the shock value, right?
Yeah.
But I think our goal here is to try to go beyond that, to really understand, like, the complexities of this case.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what led to this unthinkable act? What were the psychological and sociological factors at play?
Exactly. So let's start with Armin Meiwes himself. What can you tell us about his early life? Like, what might have set him on this path?
Well, from what I gathered from the YouTube videos you shared, Meiwes had a really lonely childhood. His father left when he was 8.
8 years old.
Yeah, just 8 years old. And so he was raised by his mother, who, according to these sources, was pretty domineering. So you can imagine the impact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of upbringing, not having that stable male figure, potentially having this overbearing mother, it can really mess with your development.
Right.
You know, your need for control, your sense of connection, it can get all warped.
That makes sense, but I'm curious about something. The video mentioned that the film Robinson Crusoe, like the classic story, somehow triggered his cannibalistic fantasies. How does that even fit into the picture?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
But it's possible that the film, I mean, it's got these themes of isolation, survival, and of course, you know, eating human flesh in extreme circumstances.
Right.
Maybe it just resonated with him on some deep level. Maybe it planted a seed. You know what I mean? A seed that just grew and grew, fueled by his loneliness and these dark desires.
So you're saying a seemingly normal film could have this profound impact on someone's psyche?
Yeah, it's disturbing to think about. And speaking of normal, I was surprised to learn that Meiwes had this, like, pretty typical life for a while, despite these dark fantasies.
Yeah, it's wild. He served in the military for 12 years, even got engaged at one point, and then later on, he was caring for his sick mother until she passed away. It's almost like he was leading a double life.
Absolutely. It's like he was conforming to societal expectations on the surface. But inside, this turmoil was brewing. This contrast between his outward normalcy and this inner turmoil, it's really unsettling.
Makes you wonder how many other people out there are living these double lives, hiding their true selves. But then something happened, something big that seemed to push Meiwes further down this dark path.
Yeah, you're talking about his mother's death in 1999. That was a turning point, like a major shift. And you have to remember, this was also the rise of the internet, of online forums. Maybe it all just created this perfect storm. You know what I mean? Like, his desires were allowed to flourish.
I see how the internet could be a factor here. The video mentioned that he started going to online forums dedicated to cannibalism. It's like the anonymity of the internet emboldened him, gave him a space to connect with others who shared this taboo interest.
Yeah, exactly. These online spaces can be so powerful, especially for someone like Meiwes, who was probably craving connection and validation that he couldn't find in the real world.
It's both fascinating and terrifying how the internet can do that, right? Connect us, but also isolate us.
Totally. And, you know, in these forums, he actually met people who shared his fantasies. But even they were hesitant to actually act on them.
So at this point, it seems like he was mainly existing in this online world, you know? Just fantasy and role-playing.
Yeah, but then he met someone who was willing to take things much further. This is when Bernd Brandes enters the picture.
Oh, this is where it gets really intense.
It does. See, unlike the others Meiwes had interacted with, Brandes wasn't just interested in talking. He actually wanted to be killed and eaten. He even posted an ad online explicitly stating his desire.
I remember that. It was chilling. And Brandes even had specific requests, right? Like incredibly disturbing ones.
He did. He wanted his penis amputated and consumed.
It's heartbreaking to think that someone could be so desperate, so troubled, to actually want something so horrific to happen to them. And think about it, Brandes had a partner, someone who had no idea about any of this.
It's a stark reminder of the hidden struggles people face. I mean, how can we truly know what's going on in someone's mind?
It's true. And for Meiwes, finding someone who not only shared his desires but actively sought them out, it must have been a huge turning point. Like a switch flipped in his mind.
Absolutely. I mean, up until this point, it was all in the realm of fantasy. But now it was becoming real. And the YouTube videos actually include excerpts from emails between Meiwes and Brandes. And reading those, you can sense Brandes's eagerness, his impatience even.
He was almost pushing Meiwes, wasn't he? Like urging him not to back down.
Exactly. And there was even this disturbing belief from Brandes that he wouldn't be Meiwes' only victim, that this was just the beginning. It's chilling.
It really is. It's like he had accepted his own death as inevitable. It's a level of despair that's hard to grasp.
And for Meiwes, I think it was a complex mix of emotions. Initially, there was hesitation, discomfort, but Brandes' determination was also enticing. It's this really messy dynamic that makes you question consent and ethics on a whole new level.
It definitely blurs the lines. I mean, was this truly consensual?
That
Or was Brandes being manipulated by Meiwes?
It's a question worth considering. And it's something we'll definitely explore further as we delve into what actually happened at Meiwes' house.
Okay, so let's get into the details of what transpired between these two men. I know it's a tough subject, but it's crucial to understanding the gravity of this case, wouldn't you say?
You're absolutely right. It's not easy to talk about, but we need to paint the full picture here.
So, according to the videos, their first meeting was kind of awkward. Brandes was like eager, almost excited, while Meiwes seemed more apprehensive, like he was having second thoughts. You can practically feel the tension, right?
Oh, absolutely. And then things escalated pretty quickly at Meiwes' house.
Yeah.
They had a sexual encounter. But afterwards, Brandes actually expressed disappointment. Not because of the act itself, but because it wasn't painful. It's like he associated pain with pleasure.
That's a disturbing psychological element for sure. We'll need to unpack that. But then they moved on to the act that would define this entire case, the amputation of Brandes' penis. And the video mentioned that it was botched and incredibly gruesome, like multiple knives, a lot of pain. Just awful.
Yeah, and what really gets me is that even with all that pain, Brandes insisted on continuing. It's like he was desperate to see it through. And Meiwes was filming the whole thing, capturing Brandes' descent into this, like, detached state.
I can't even imagine what was going through their minds at that point. The pain, the blood, it's almost too much to comprehend.
It really is. And then it gets even weirder. Brandes actually tried to eat his own amputated penis, but he didn't like the taste.
This is also surreal. It's like something out of a horror movie, you know?
It really does defy logic and any sense of normalcy. And as the medication Brandes had taken started wearing off, he made a final, chilling request. He asked Meiwes to stab him.
So this was it, the last stage of their horrific pact. So did Meiwes do it, like, right away?
No, not right away. They waited for several hours. Brandes was drifting in and out of consciousness. Finally, at around 2:30 in the morning, Meiwes stabbed him. And later, he described the experience as this mix of hate and happiness. It's disturbing.
It really makes you think about the complexities of that moment. It's almost impossible to understand.
Absolutely. And then Meiwes butchered and consumed Brandes' remains, buried some parts in the garden, stored others in the freezer. It's a gruesome ending to an already horrific tale.
It's almost unbelievable that all of this happened, but of course it couldn't stay hidden forever. What led to Meiwes' capture?
You know, it's ironic. It was Meiwes himself who set the wheels in motion. He was looking for another victim, and posted an ad online. A medical student in Innsbruck saw the ad and, well, he was horrified.
So in trying to find another willing participant, he exposed himself.
Exactly. The medical student contacted the police, and that's when the investigation began.
What a twist. I bet the police were stunned by what they found.
Oh, absolutely. They found videotapes, the emails, images, even Brandes' remains. There was no denying what had happened.
And I can only imagine the media frenzy that followed. This case must have been huge. A real-life horror story.
It was global news. The Cannibal of Rotenburg was everywhere, sparking all these discussions about evil, human nature, the role of the internet.
Right. And then there are the legal questions. How do you prosecute a case where the victim consented to their own death? It's uncharted territory.
Exactly. The trial was unlike anything the German legal system had ever seen.
And that's where things get really interesting. We'll dive into those legal proceedings and the societal debates this case sparked when we come back. Stay tuned, because it's about to get even more complicated. Welcome back to our deep dive into this really unsettling case. Before the break, we were talking about the media frenzy and all the complex legal questions. But I'm still thinking about Brandes. I mean, what led him to that online ad, to wanting that horrific fate?
That's the question, isn't it? Like, it's the one that everyone kept asking. What would drive someone to that?
Right.
Well, from what we know from the sources, Brandes had a rough past, too. He lost his mother when he was young. Suicide.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there are reports that he felt neglected by his father. And, that kind of early trauma can have huge impact, especially on how you form attachments and cope with pain, emotional pain.
So are you saying that his desire to be consumed, to like experience that ultimate pain and submission, could it be rooted in his childhood?
It's a possibility, right? Some psychologists suggest that people who've experienced early trauma, especially losing a parent to suicide, they can develop a really distorted relationship with pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Like they might subconsciously seek it out, almost like a way to cope with their anguish.
Yeah.
Or even to feel something, anything, when they're feeling numb.
That's so sad. I mean, to think that someone's deepest desire could be tied to that kind of trauma. And it makes you think, was that desire always there, or was it amplified by, by Meiwes?
It's tough to say, but what's clear is that the internet, with its anonymity and its ability to connect people, it gave Brandes a space to explore his desires and ultimately to act on them.
Right, and one of the videos made a good point about how these niche online forums, they create this sense of community. Like you finally find a place where you feel understood, even if those shared interests are really dark.
Exactly. And that sense of belonging, it can be incredibly powerful, especially for someone like Brandes, who was probably feeling isolated and, well, despairing. The internet, in a way, gave him a purpose, a path toward fulfilling this ultimate desire.
It's wild, right? How the internet can connect and isolate at the same time. It brings out the best and worst in us.
It really does. And in this case, it definitely played a role in enabling this tragic encounter.
Yeah. So let's move on to the trial. Given how unprecedented this case was, how did the German legal system even approach this? Like, how do you prosecute something like this?
It was a mess, legally speaking. The fact that Brandes willingly participated, that he consented to his own death, it created this huge challenge for the prosecution.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no legal precedent for killing on demand. They were in uncharted territory.
So how did they end up charging Meiwes?
Well, at first they charged him with manslaughter.
Manslaughter.
Yeah, and the first trial, believe it or not, resulted in a pretty light sentence, 8.5 years.
Wow, really?
But the prosecution appealed. They argued that Meiwes' actions were premeditated, that his main motive was to satisfy his own, well, morbid desires.
So they were saying that even if Brandes consented, Meiwes was still responsible.
Exactly. They are arguing that true consent can't exist when someone wants to die, that killing, regardless of the victim's wishes, is still murder.
That's a tough argument. Did the court agree?
They did. In the retrial, the court overturned the manslaughter conviction and sentenced Meiwes to life in prison for murder and disturbing the peace of the dead.
So in the end, the court said that consent, even in these extreme circumstances, doesn't erase the crime of murder.
That's right. And it really forced the German legal system to grapple with some really fundamental questions about consent, autonomy, personal freedom. It set a precedent, the desire to die, no matter how real it is, doesn't give someone else the right to take a life.
What a landmark case. And the ethical questions, they go way beyond the courtroom.
Absolutely. The Meiwes case sparked debate worldwide, not just about cannibalism, but about consent, the boundaries of freedom, and society's responsibility to protect people, even from themselves.
It makes you think about that line between fulfilling someone's wishes, even if they're self-destructive, and the need to prevent harm. And there's the mental health aspect, too.
Yeah, that's huge. Both Meiwes and Brandes, they were struggling. Meiwes with his loneliness, his need for control, his fantasies, and Brandes with his trauma and his desire for, well, annihilation.
And I remember one of the videos mentioned that Meiwes said he regretted not getting therapy. Like maybe things could have been different. Do you think professional help could have prevented this tragedy?
Who knows, right? But it raises an important point. What if Meiwes had dealt with his thoughts and desires in a healthy way? What if Brandes had found a way to cope with his trauma? Would their paths have ever crossed?
It's a haunting question.
It is. And it highlights how important mental health awareness is. We need to create a society where people feel comfortable seeking help, where they can find support before their struggles become dangerous.
Well said. And what about the internet? We've talked about how it connected these two, but it was also how Meiwes tried to find more victims. How do we balance freedom of expression online with protecting vulnerable people?
Yeah, that's the challenge. The internet is a double-edged sword. It has so much potential for good, but it can also be a dangerous place, especially for people with mental health struggles.
It's like a dark mirror, reflecting our deepest fears and desires and giving them an audience.
Exactly. This case shows us that there are real dangers lurking online, And we need to be aware, we need to be vigilant, and we need to report anything suspicious.
And we need to teach people how to navigate the online world safely, to think critically, to recognize red flags.
Couldn't agree more. We need to give people the tools to tell facts from fiction, to stay safe, and to know when to seek help.
So to wrap up, I think the big takeaway here is that the Meiwes case, it's more than just a shocking true crime story. It makes us think about who we are, about freedom and consent, about mental health and technology, about the darker side of humanity.
Yeah, it's a story that should stick with us, to make us question our assumptions and inspire us to build a world where tragedies like this are less likely to happen. A world where mental health is a priority, where vulnerable people are protected, and where the internet is a force for good.
That's a powerful message, and I hope it resonates with our listeners. This case, as disturbing as it is, it has so much to teach us about ourselves and the world we live in. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, there are lessons to be learned and room for growth.
It's a call to action for all of us, to be more aware, more compassionate, and more proactive in creating a world where everyone feels safe, supported, and empowered to seek help when they need it.
Thank you for joining us on this difficult but important deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. Okay, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive. We've really gone deep into the psychology of both Meiwes and Brandes and talked about that wild legal battle. But now I kind of want to step back, look at the bigger picture. Like, what can we actually learn from all of this? What are the implications, not just for this case, but for, society as a whole?
Yeah, I think this case really highlights some dark truths about us humans.
Yeah.
And asks this really tough question. Even if someone says they want to die, is it ever okay to kill them? Legally,
Right.
morally.
Right, and this isn't just like assisted suicide or something. This goes way beyond that. It's about this blurry line between, fulfilling someone's desires no matter how messed up they are and protecting people from themselves.
I know what you mean. It challenges our whole idea of autonomy, free will. Can we really say we have control over our lives if our desires, especially like in Brandes' case, are so self-destructive? And where does society's responsibility come in?
It makes me think about the mental health piece of all this. Those videos mention that Meiwes said he wished he'd gone to therapy. What if? Could therapy have stopped this whole thing from happening?
It's hard to know for sure, right? But yeah, both of these guys were obviously dealing with some heavy stuff. Meiwes with his loneliness, his need for control, his fantasies, and Brandes with his trauma and his death wish. What if they'd gotten the help they needed?
It's what if they'd had a chance to process their pain, their struggles in a healthier way?
Exactly. It just emphasizes the need for more mental health awareness, for getting rid of the stigma, making sure people can actually get support before things escalate to this kind of horrifying level.
And then there's the whole internet angle. I mean, it connected them, sure, but it was also how Meiwes looked for more victims.
Yeah.
How do we balance freedom of expression online with keeping people safe, especially vulnerable people?
It's tricky, right? The internet is amazing for so many things, but it can also be a dangerous place, especially for people who are struggling with mental health or maybe looking for validation in the wrong places.
It's like the internet gives our darkest thoughts a voice, an audience, and that can be really scary.
Yeah, this case really shows that. There are some dark corners out there.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of that. Be vigilant. If you see something, say something.
Absolutely. And we need to teach people how to navigate all of that, how to be smart online, to think for themselves, to spot those red flags.
Couldn't agree more. Media literacy, critical thinking, these are essential skills, especially for young people.
So I guess if there's one big takeaway from this deep dive, it's that this case, it's more than just a shocking true crime story. It's a story about us, about humanity, about the limits of freedom and consent, about the complicated intersection of mental health, technology, and, the dark side of human nature.
Yeah, and it's a story that should stay with us. It should make us question what we think we know, and maybe even inspire us to create a better world. A world where mental health is a priority, where we protect those who are vulnerable, and where the internet, with all its potential for darkness, can truly be a force for good.
That's a powerful message. And I hope our listeners are thinking about all of this long after this episode ends. This case, as disturbing as it is, it forces us to look inward, to examine ourselves and our society, and hopefully to grow from it.
It's a call to action, really, to be more aware, more compassionate, more proactive in creating that kind of world, a world where everyone feels safe, supported, and empowered to get help when they need it.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this journey. It was tough, but important. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.